a sensible, healthy, capitalist, profit-maximizing organization will ask itself the question, how can we help our employees do their best work first?
Hello, friend.
Mel, it's June. It's June in 2024.
It is.
It's
It is.
happening.
Do you guys go to the beach?
Yes, we do go to the beach. So we live about an hour and a half, 2 hours from the beach. When you drive there, I swear to God, this is where they film all the car commercials because you can get on some really nice, like serpentining, switchbacky roads. They're all
Yeah.
tree lined, but you just imagine the Porsche commercial with the back tire kicking up leaves and that kind of stuff. It's a beautiful, beautiful drive. And you live on the beach. Or
I wish I lived on it. I live 5 minutes away. We just got our beach pass. I like to go early in the morning when no one's there, so I'll typically be there early, and then I stay until noon and head out when all the people show up.
do you have an umbrella and stuff?
If I stay there past noon, if it's going to be a full day thing, I have one of
Yeah.
those tents that it has like a little window in the back, and like I'll hang my legs out, but I am too Casper the Friendly Ghost to be out in that sun. I got melasma so bad one year, it looked like I had dirt on my forehead.
What'd you do to get that off? Like your like
I used
vitamin A? What do you do?
retinol,
Retinol, yeah, just
and it
retinol.
just eventually rubbed off. It just looked like I had a straight up patch of dirt on my forehead. Like Ash Wednesday was all here.
In the name of the Father
Right.
and the Son. Yeah. Oh, that's really funny.
So
Yeah.
funny.
Thank
Anyway,
God for chemicals.
we are here because we met with leadership expert, consultant, and author of several books, but the latest book, The Problem with Change, Ashley Goodall.
He's held executive positions at Deloitte and at Cisco, heading up people organizations. Full disclosure, Mel and I have both worked with Ashley in the past when our paths all crossed at Deloitte. What Ashley is really wonderful at is thinking about how humans can thrive in the workplace. And in order to do that, what do they need, Mel?
Stability.
Stability. I'll tell you, Mel, when I read this book, I had two very distinct feelings. One was just total delight because the way the case was written around what work feels like right now was so absurd and so fucking accurate at the same time that I was laughing through half of the book because I'm like, right?
It was so relatable. I'm thinking, yeah, man, I could have written these stories too because this is 100% the experience.
Yeah, especially in the last 10 years. You and I were talking like it doesn't feel like it's always been this way, but the last 10 years, it's just gotten more and more and more.
Yeah, and change for change's sake, not necessarily meaningful change. And it can feel that way sometimes, that it's not meaningful. It's just to do it.
The other very distinct emotion I got was a massive sense of urgency, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to have Ashley on the pod, because it really does feel, and the data is in, that organizations are not only incented to disrupt and incented to change, i.e., bring in mergers, re-strategize, reorg, bring new leaders in. Not only are they incented to do that, but they're almost addicted to it. How do we get to this place where it really feels like we're all working constantly in a cult of disruption? Because that all has a massive human toll. That all has a massive negative impact on companies' bottom line. And so we wanted to bring Ashley in to talk about this, and then what the hell do we do about it?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
with that, where's Ashley?
Ashley. Ashley, welcome to the pod. Thanks so much for joining us today.
It's lovely to be here with you both.
Nice to see you. It's been a while.
I think it must be on the cusp of double-digit years, but we're all basically the same people we were.
We 1,000%. Maybe a little wiser. Maybe
Wiser,
maybe.
yeah. A little calmer.
Yeah.
Certainly smarter. We're definitely smarter than we were.
And we went through the plague. There's that.
Okay, and that's true. Yes.
That's true.
Okay,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so yay for the last 10 years.
Yeah. Well, we're here to talk about change. One of the things that really struck me with this book was this Life in the Blender. While I was reading it, I was just like, this has been my last 10 years of work, where here comes a merger and acquisition. We're going to re-strategize something. Oh, by the way, now we're going to switch up the leadership team. Oh, hi, here's the management consulting firm coming in, and they're in the ear of the CHRO, or they're in the ear of the CEO, and now they're going to put their stamp on it. This was something that was like every 10 years, and then it was every 5 years, and now it's every 2 to 3 years. And there are some companies that it's almost every year. They're re-strategizing. And it's just so much change that it makes it impossible to feel like you can get anything done. And there's like this massive human toll on it too. One of the things you talk about with the Life in the Blender is this idea that change doesn't equal improvement.
There's an experiment that I don't write about in the book involving rats and pellets. So we should probably chat about rats and pellets for a quick hot second.
I'll do it.
And I haven't looked it up recently, but I know how it goes.
Yeah.
So it goes like this. You put a rat in a cage, and there's a little lever, or as I say where I come from, a lever. And if the rat presses the lever or the lever, it gets a pellet of food. Sometimes. And other times it doesn't. And so you can do this nice control condition, and you can see how often does the rat press the lever if every time it presses it gets food. How often does it press it if it never gets food? And how often does it press it if it sometimes gets food? And the result is that the rat that always gets food doesn't press the lever very much, because it just presses it when it's hungry and then goes off and has a rat nap somewhere. The rat that never gets food gives up really quickly, because rats aren't stupid. The rat that sometimes gets food presses the lever like a maniac, because it's like the spontaneous, the occasional reward drives this crazy behavior. And in a way, listening to your narrative of we used to do change a little bit and now we've done it more and then we've done it more, it's like we've only got one damn lever at work. It worked a couple of times a few years ago. Has anyone else got any ideas? I don't know. Let's press it again, shall we? Well, it didn't work that time. Let's press it again. It still didn't work. And the rest of us, now the rat metaphor fails a little bit, are on the other end of the lever somewhere. I think this idea of constant change, reinvention, transformation, disruption has become the only idea about how to run a company, which doesn't mean it never works. I think there's plenty of evidence that we've gone past the point where it's helping, certainly to the extent that we're doing it today. The irony of all of this is the godfather of disruption, if you like, is Clayton Christensen, and who writes a book in 1997 called The Innovator's Dilemma, where he says the young upstarts companies will eat the lunch of the old established companies because they have a different series of economic constraints, and they have many more degrees of freedom, and so they can innovate and innovate and innovate and innovate, and all of a sudden they go from a crappy product at a ridiculous price point with new customers to customers who suddenly flip from the established players to them, because all of a sudden the price point got a little bit better, they got a minimum set of features, and everyone can see the upside, and hallelujah. So if you're a big company, be really worried, because the upstarts are going to take your business away. And everyone goes, oh yes, Kodak,
Yeah.
oh yes, Blockbuster. And you recite the litany of names, of which there aren't 20, but anyway. But then if you actually read that book all the way to the end, you discover what his prescription is. And his prescription is, if you're a big company, you're worried about being disrupted, what you should do is you take a small group of people, separate them from the company, either spin them out or make them a special product team, put them in a different place, wall them off, give them a guaranteed budget, give them a very clear mission, keep a tight group of people, don't change direction for a while, leave them alone, and they will do the innovating for you. And what's that? That's
Stability. That's stability on
Stability.
both ends. On both ends. It's the stability in the legacy corp and in the incubator.
The innovator's dilemma, said differently, is how can we create more stability at work? But no one has ever, to my knowledge, said that's what that book is about. It's actually a book about stability. And, we turn it into catchphrases, and it's disrupt everything and disrupt yourself and fail fast and move fast and break things and blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. And here we are having a detailed conversation about how miserable change is at work. I don't think anyone ever intended that we get to this point, but I think we're massively in it now. And I think we've got to come up with some different things.
This has a serious impact. This life in the blender is throwing so much around. And if businesses are in this hamster wheel of every year you're making a change and you don't have the time or the runway to see the impact of that change and whether it's working before you change it again. So now it's this vicious cycle of the blender. Does it become critical that organizations start to create psychologically safe environments where people can say, hey, this is not a good idea? Do you think the C-suite is open to that, or boardrooms are open to that?
So I wrote the book partly out of the sneaking suspicion that C-suites were not aware of all of this. We need to raise our awareness of all of this stuff. Psychological safety is an interesting one. It's a real thing. It's very clear in the literature that's a thing. In our discussion of some of the other sort of psychological impacts of change, we can lose sight of the connection between the environment of work and the performance of humans. And it's too easy for people to go, you know what, suck it up. It's called work for a reason. We haven't created these institutions to make you lot happy. You don't get to feel good every day. You don't get to have your mental health and your psychological safety and all of these things because this is the school of hard knocks. So I think the most important thing to do the whole time is to go, listen, you could choose to create a healthy, supportive environment because that's a good thing to do and you're a human too. But if that argument doesn't get you there, these things are what lead to performance or non-performance. It is a silly way to run a company to subject it to life in the blender, to constant change, because what you're doing is removing the ability of your people to solve things for you or, massively ironically, to innovate. Innovation doesn't come from change. It comes from stability. It comes from a predictable set of relationships and environments and rituals and rhythms that allow people to go, all right, I don't have to worry about a whole bunch of stuff. I can focus my time and attention and creativity on a well-understood problem without having to worry that in 3 weeks' time I'll have a new boss and I've got to explain what I'm doing to them. And then 3 weeks after that, I'll have some other thing and some other thing and some other thing and some other thing. So the prescription for all of this is, for sure, change less. Have a higher bar on all of this stuff. Understand that we are playing with fire here. Understand that the fire is not people's upset, but people's performance. Understand you're dealing with that. And then, sure, we've got to change once in a while, but people have got to learn what stability looks like at work, what the inoculation is against change. And we've got to be very deliberate at creating stability at work. Because as soon as you say that to anybody, as soon as you say, how about some stability? The people who are humans go, oh, yeah, that sounds really nice.
Relief, right? Your shoulders
Really nice.
drop, you
Really
take
nice.
a
That's the
sigh.
world
Yeah.
we want. I think that's the world people are imagining where they say, you know what, I believe in change. They're imagining a world where change comes, improvement comes from stability. That's what we're actually all trying to reach for.
Out of curiosity, when you talk to leaders that are sitting at a C level and you're talking about this case for stability, right? The problem with change, the case for stability, what is their reaction?
The ones I talk to feel the tension between the pressure to change and the need to look after people. I haven't run into many people who would name it as stability. So I think what I took away, and again, I interviewed people up and down organizations for the book, there are people who see quite clearly in executive positions the downside of change. We just haven't given them words and techniques for the counterforce thing. But the folks I spoke to, or the folks I speak to, are not going, oh, goodness me, I've got to turn down change and dial up stability. They're saying, I've got to turn down change, and then what? And is there a way? We need to teach leaders, we need to tell stories that the stuff that we all want in the changey change actually comes from the stability. And the stuff that we want in the changey change is performance, innovation, actually comes from stability more often.
Yeah.
It is not to do the jobs for them or tell them how to do their jobs or decide for them how their jobs are best to be done. It is to pin back your ears and listen and look and offer and support and help. And again, the role of an organization is to support its employees in doing their best work, which doesn't start with ignoring the employees and deciding what best work looks like. It starts with paying attention to the employees and how best work happens and where it comes from. And back to stability, it leads you to teams, it leads you to ritual, it leads you to helping build people's competence, it leads you to a whole bunch of stuff. But you don't follow the path to any of those things if you don't first understand that a sensible, healthy, capitalist, profit maximizing organization will ask itself the question, how can we help our employees do their best work first?
So much of this, I am wondering, is this on the capability of leaders? When I think about the people that are making the decisions about the change, the transformation, in my experience, a lot of those people have MBB firms in their ears telling them, this is what your competition's doing, this is what the market's doing. They have pressures from various stakeholders, the stock market, the board. You have to keep up, you have to keep up. Is some of the reason why we're here is because leaders have the lack of capability to lead.
We can offer a couple of candidate explanations, right? One is that leaders are living in an ecosystem that demands this stuff. And the ecosystem, you've named, I think, many of the bits of it. Mm-hmm. There is a stock market. And by the way, the stock market isn't a person, but the people who analyze the stock market are people. And they've learned that shareholder value is the most important thing. Then there are the people who tell the CEOs what to do, and they're the activist investors and the consultants and the investment bankers, by the way. And they've been brought up in all of this. And you keep going down the chain to who are all the decision makers and what are the unwritten truths, or in many cases, the written, scare quotes, truths of this world. And a lot of it is we have to maximize shareholder value, even though we can't measure it over any sort of decent time frame or human time frame at any rate. You run into the sort of idea that you have to take dramatic action. Yeah. And that if you're not taking dramatic action, somebody else will, and your competitors will. So there's a lot of reinforcement of a set of ideas and not a lot of people standing up and going, hang on a second. But the alternate concept of work might be run an organization so that its employees can offer their best and reason up from that, up and out from that idea. And that's not crazy in terms of looking after the interests of owners or the interests of customers or the interests of, God help us, employees. But that's not the place we live today. We live in a place where there are certain accepted truths about how you run a company, and you get to look after the employee stuff until you feel it conflicts with the set of accepted truths, at which point you snap back into the set of accepted truths and you do the layoff and you do the restructuring and you do the spin-off and you do the spin-in. And in between them, you say words like people are our greatest asset, and everybody rolls their eyes and they put up with it because apparently not many people can think of a different way of doing all of this. But yeah, there is an ecosystem component to all of this, I think.
My concern with that is when that ecosystem is running on quarters, like we need to see improvement, we need to see impact financially, within the next 3 months. That's the way almost every organization is living right now. I've seen so many organizations do this as of late. They're needing to make an impact. One of the levers is absolutely change. And another one is dump the people, get rid of these people. How do you think most organizations view people, view their employees?
I think that many leaders are actually sincerely torn because they can see enough of the ecosystem and they can see enough of the humans. And they know that the layoff isn't a wonderful thing to do.
Mm.
And they probably know in the back of their minds that if you do the layoff and the market doesn't like it, that will be the wrong outcome. But if you do the layoff and the market likes it for a couple of days, that will be the right outcome. And they probably also know at the same time that's not the leader they set out to be when they were more junior.
Hmm.
I think if you give leaders the benefit of the doubt, you can imagine a leader sincerely and honestly conflicted about all of this. My point would be, to the extent that's true, could you choose option B once in a while? Could you actually choose the people once in a while? Or could we have a conversation about starting with the people once in a while, as opposed to the needs of the machine must always drive what we do, because we can't stop the machine. Because sooner or later you go, the machine is us. Come on, folks. We can decide to stop the machine. One way to stop the machine is to take your company private, for goodness sakes. It was, Francesca, you and I have a history at Deloitte,
Mhm.
and Deloitte does not worry about what's going on this quarter with nearly the intensity that public companies do. And so Deloitte, in a way, has a different attitude, and private companies have a different attitude to their investors, which, by the way, is weird because they're more intimate with their investors, because most of the investors are the partners who are walking up and down the corridors every day.
Yeah.
So it's like the private company world has a closer relationship with its owners, which allows them to be long-term thinkers. Isn't that strange? And that the public company world has a much more arm's length relationship with many of its investors, at least, which forces them to do short-term things. It's because there isn't a relationship there. It does strike me that when you change the context in which leaders are asked to make decisions, then they can tilt more towards people. I remember one of the things I was most impressed by in my time at Deloitte was what Deloitte did in the Great Recession.
I know that I use this story.
Yeah.
Tell the story, because this is you tell the story. You tell the story.
We'll see if we're telling the same story. It'd be funny if we weren't. And there are
Yeah.
two fabulous stories.
Yeah,
Okay,
there
well,
were
I'll
two
tell
great
mine.
stories. Yeah.
Yeah. So mine is that Deloitte said, look, there are some storm clouds on the horizon. So what we would do if we were to do the usual thing would be fire a whole bunch of people and try and weather the storm. And then probably in a couple of years, we'll hire them back again.
Hmm.
But that's silly, isn't it? Because we're going to upturn a whole bunch of lives. And already things are pretty bad because it's 2008 and we know what was going on in 2008. And so we'll upturn a bunch of lives and then we'll have a whole bunch of hiring costs that we don't need. So we're going to go, the phrase I always remember was, we're going to go long on people. And we're going to carry those extra costs and we're going to take it out of the partners' pockets. And the partners will support this, and the partners did support this. And we are going to put people first so that when the storm passes, we are more strongly positioned to face into the future. And it worked. And
Yeah.
it was just massively sensible. And it shouldn't be the only example I can think of that in the last quarter century. That's the thing that really upsets me. I'm sure there are other examples that I haven't come across yet, but that's a terrifyingly rare thing for a company to do. And I think if a public company did that today, they would be in all sorts of trouble because the ecosystem would go, you people are crazy. And the activist investor would show up and go, I'm going to have a proxy fight with you guys now because you shouldn't be allowed to run this company. And the institutional investors would go, you just sank the stock price. So blah, 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 blah. Was that your story?
No, it wasn't my
Oh my God,
story.
we got two stories.
It wasn't my
Oh my
story.
God. This is so great.
Yeah, but during the same amount of time, and I might be getting these wrong, right? Yeah, I big fish stories periodically might have embellished, but during the same
Did
time,
you just say big fish as a verb?
I did. That works. I know. There
Okay,
you go.
big
Yeah,
fish.
like big fish.
Okay.
Okay, but so 2008,
Right.
right? So they went long on people. Another way I remember them going long on people was deciding to build Deloitte University.
Oh yeah.
So not only are we going to go long on people by holding our people and keeping them, but we're also asking for a capital call of the partners. And if you don't know what that is, hey, partners, I need everyone to cough up. I'm making this up $100,000 to build a corporate university, which, by the way, this was not something that people were doing because we want this to be this cultural hub to invest in people as a evidence proof point of going long on people. Again, while everyone was cutting, they went long. And the thing that I think about though is that was 2008. It was a recent example.
Our listeners need to write in.
Yes.
Or goodness me, gosh, how old do I sound? Write in on
Right.
an envelope, put a stamp on it, and send it to us at PO Box, goodness knows what. There are quite a few firms that have gone private recently because they want to exit the quarter by quarter ecosystem, the activist investor ecosystem. There are probably other examples out there of
Yeah.
having greater freedom as a private organization. But the answer to all of this can't be go private. It
Yeah.
can't be. Because if you're a large company, that means you've got to find hundreds of billions of dollars. The answer to all of this has got to be have better companies.
Yes.
People have better companies. How are we going to do that?
Yeah. Going back to every once in a while, not even all the time, but every once in a while,
Right.
going long on your people, like making that courageous decision potentially to go long.
Or getting good at the difference between change and improvement. Everyone's interested in improvement. That's fine. That's actually what the activist people want and the consultants want and the investment bankers want and the analysts want. They actually want improvement. But we've just lost the ability to distinguish between change and improvement. So every change looks like a good change and off we go.
Yeah.
How can we make things better? You have to start with the recognition that change and improvement aren't the same thing. I think people at work know that, and most people know a half-baked idea fairly quickly when they see it coming, and it is career suicide to raise your hand more than a couple of times. So the serious point here is we cannot say in organizations, tell us if this is a bad idea, because we've created, again, a power structure, an ecosystem where it's hard for people to tell you. If you're a leader, you've got to get curious and you've got to get skeptical about all of this stuff. And you have to think much harder about whether I am in change creating, as you mentioned a moment ago, Mel, learned helplessness. So people have such a lack of control that all they feel like doing is phoning it in every day, or you're creating anxiety, or you're upsetting teams, or you're disturbing people's sense of place or meaning or any of those things. But we have to teach leaders, they have to be the ones doing this, and we have to explain what no one has ever explained to them before, that this stuff ain't always a good thing. And it has some very serious psychological consequences. And if you're in the business of improving an organization, then very serious psychological consequences are things that generally you want to avoid. We need to train leaders massively more intensively and massively differently than we do it today, because we've all seen this. Most leadership training in organizations is a sort of afterthought. And we very often give people the job of a leader before we train them to do the job of a leader. And you don't do this for surgeons or for pilots or for anyone who's got somebody else's life in their hands or for any job where it's really important to be good at it. But somehow we do it for leaders as though, yeah, the leader thing, look, you were the best of the people at doing the follower job, so we gave you the leader job, and the training's in 6 months. And meanwhile, here are some articles all about change and disruption. You'll enjoy them. Off you go. Good luck. And then what's the person do? They look around and go, what are all the other leaders doing? They're doing reorgs. They're doing disruption. Oh dear, I'd better do that as well. And we again perpetuate a cycle of leadership capabilities. You were asking Francesca a little while ago about, is this about leadership capability? I think for sure it's about leadership training. It's about leadership selection. It's about leadership support. It's about the leadership infrastructure and ecosystem of our organizations in a very significant way.
If I could add one too, and I'd be curious about your reaction to this, be the cohesion of the leadership team as well. I've seen senior leadership teams where the loudest voice in the room gets the win. And if you can't dissent, or if you can't at least understand how to work together as a leadership team, I don't think your organization has a chance. When you look at leadership teams that don't have a healthy cohesion or a healthy dissent ability, your organization is pretty screwed.
And what does that team therefore lack? It lacks a sense
Stability.
of belonging. It lacks a sense of place. It lacks a sense of meaning. It lacks a sense of certainty. It lacks a sense of predictability. It lacks a sense of control. It is a failing team because the place where all of the things that we're talking about either thrive or wither is on a team. And yeah, if the top team doesn't experience stability, doesn't know how to foster its own stability, then yeah, good luck everybody else.
It's interesting, especially if stability is the name of the game, right? One of the use cases is around the onboarding of leaders. When you think about a leader's first 90 days, either new in an organization or just new in their role, there is this expectation that they've changed something, that they've innovated on something. Do we start there? Is that the lowest denominator to say, stop having this expectation for new leaders?
It is part of the ecosystem thing as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because we teach people to come in and make change in the first 90 days, therefore change is the thing that leaders do. Therefore, new leaders must come and make change. It would be a lovely and fascinating exercise to say to a leader, all right, in your first 90 days, I want you to discover everything that's working and elevate those things and explain to everybody why those are examples of the sorts of things you as a leader want to build in an organization, and just completely flip the script. If you flipped it that way, you would be building massive stability for people, which goes, here's who we are eternally. Here's how we do our work eternally. Here's what we value eternally. Here's who we seek to serve eternally. We're going to keep all of those, honor those, elevate those, preserve those. And over here, X and Y, we need to find a better way of doing these things. Can you help? For me, at least, that's a very psychologically healthy way of beginning a narrative that feels like an improvement narrative, not a change narrative. Now, this whole conversation is about a hell of a lot more than the narrative. But it is interesting to just try on a few words for size and see how they make you feel as a leader or as an employee, and to see if we've actually put the emphasis on the wrong syllable when it comes to all things change. And we should emphasize some stability too.
To do this thing with our guests called Rapid Round. Ideally, quick, short answers. However,
if you met me,
I know, I understand, I get it, but this is the thing. This if we need to go off, we need to go off on the scenic route. That's the point. It's fine. All right, are you ready to play, Ashley?
The medium, quick, medium, rapid round. Yes, I am.
We're not willing to take a stand on anything.
Hopefully, this is a fun one for you. In your book, you mentioned the word disrupt gets folks extra bonus biz dude points, which cracked me up. What buzzwords would you like to see die off already?
Strategic, which is not considered a buzzword, but is affixed to the front of far too many things to make them sound better than they are. and to paper over a lot of very lazy thinking. So you just have to call it an asset. It's not a strategic asset. You have to call it an investment, not a strategic investment. And we can save a few syllables from the world.
I appreciate. Let's simplify. What new buzzwords are on the horizon that you're like, let's stop this immediately before this catches on?
AI is getting
Oh,
put in front
Jesus.
of everything.
Truly.
And some things that are AI, which is a thing, but plenty of things that aren't AI and that are actually just math or an algorithm. But it's AI this and AI this and AI this. And AI is the new blockchain. Because a few years ago it was, we'll do this on the blockchain and this on the blockchain and this on the blockchain and this on the blockchain. And sooner or later you just want to go, shut up. AI is terrifying, I think, for me certainly, because it seems to remove humans from a lot of necessarily human interactions. And you've got to ask yourself, where does that point to? But I don't think we help by affixing AI on the front of things that aren't AI-like.
All right. What would you like to see CEOs do more of?
Listen.
How about less of? What would you like to see them do less of?
Change for the sake of change. By the way, can I go back now? I'm going to go back to my prior answer. Listen. There is an art to listen. I don't just mean be conversationally savvy, create the systems and structures to understand the experience of work on the front lines and then pay attention to that. So that there is like an infrastructure that needs to happen for listening to occur.
I love that answer. There's a very deep schism a lot of times between the front line and leadership. And quite honestly, we have all the tools, Qualtrics, blah, 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 to do that efficiently. It's just listen to it and maybe do something with it would be nice too.
But you have to make it a priority and you have to realize that the things that people tell you are not the whole story.
Fair. Yeah. All right. Same question for CHROs, our chief HR officers. A lot of times they are in the ear of the CEO and the people voice sometimes, but what would you like to see them do more of?
I wrote a chapter about it in the book, Advocate for Employees. And again, that's a hard thing because business leaders don't always want to hear that. They often want HR to tell us the legal and people implications of the business decisions we want to make and not necessarily come up to the C-suite and go, you shouldn't do this because this will create uncertainty, anxiety, unbelonging, displacement, blah, 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 blah. You shouldn't do it. But I would like to see CHROs feel the necessity of doing that more. And by the way, to give another answer to one of the prior quick fire questions, which is now a slow fire question, I'd like to see CEOs demand that of their heads of HR more. I'd like to see more CEOs go, you know what? We actually do really need to change the balance on the people stuff. And so head of HR, that's on you. And if you come and tell me we've got the balance wrong, I'm going to listen to you.
Yes or no? Do you believe most HR organizations are working in benefit of their people?
I think they're missing a few things.
Like?
If you look at the way HR is structured, it's structured to support business leaders mainly. It's structured around business priorities. I've spent countless hours sitting in HR offsites where HR says, all right, as good citizens of life in the blender, we're going to change our strategy. What should the new strategy be? And someone around the table goes, we should start with the business strategy, and then we should figure out the people implications of the business strategy, and that will tell us the HR strategy, won't it? That's an incomplete answer.
Yes, it is.
Because the other part is, what do the humans need?
Mm-hmm.
And the humans don't need the business strategy. The humans need the conditions of human performance. So those are things. We could bring those into the conversation. We could bring those into the strategy. I would love a stability governance organization in a company. What would stability governance look like? You can imagine HR playing that role, doesn't at the moment. How do we train leaders? How do we listen? And how do we deploy ourselves so that we understand the experience on the front lines? Because again, most of the time, you have to be a business of a certain size to get one HR person who is then massively run off their feet trying to keep up with the leaders charging around doing the business strategy stuff. We've got to figure out a way of rethinking that so that we expand HR's portfolio to include the conditions of human performance, because goodness me, those should live somewhere in our organizational construct.
Yeah. And right now it's like learning and development. Sometimes it's looking at the talent management team and being like, aren't you doing that? Are you doing that? Because I'm not doing that. That's not my domain. So it doesn't feel like it's something that is its own entity and needs to be its own entity.
And there's a little bit more to continue my very long answer to this now.
That's good.
Not at all quick fire. This is the slow fire round. That when HR talks about performance, we get very quickly to performance management and skills and all the things that we can capture in spreadsheets and that the software gives us. But if you go and talk to people on the front lines about what are the ingredients of performance, they go, a leader who talks to me in language I understand, a sense of predictability, and a set of relationships on my team. And there is no line item budget in HR for those things. So the definition of performance needs to be agreed and understood, because HR doesn't actually map to those things. HR maps to things that you hand money to vendors for.
Yeah.
And those things are good organizational administration things. But if you think that those are the same as performance things, then you have a very strange idea of what performance looks like.
Ashley, thanks so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure seeing you and chatting.
Lovely, lovely to catch up, and let's do this again soon.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can come over and say hi to us on the TikToks and LinkedIn community. Hit us up at yourworkfriends.com. We're always posting stuff on there. And if you found this episode helpful, share with your work friends. Thanks,
Bye, friend.